Your Royal Highness, Venerables, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to share with you my thoughts on two great Buddhist women. Today my paper is Madsi and Mahapajapati as great women in Buddhist tradition. My paper offers an analysis of crucial moments in the lives of two great Buddhist women, namely Madsi and Mahapajapati. Madsi showed great strength and determination to maintain the traditional role of women as wife by insisting on following her husband, Prince Vesantara, into the forest. Mahapajapati shows great determination to seek alternative spiritual life for women by seeking full ordination for women. Both women, Madsi and Mahapajapati, continue to serve as role models for women in contemporary Buddhist world as they represent two major choices in the life of Buddhist women. One, the traditional supportive role within the family, and the other, the possibility of ordination or a spiritual path for women themselves. We can say that two of the most well-known women in the Buddhist tradition are Madsi, a royal consort of Prince Vesantara, and perhaps Visakha, a wealthy lay woman who made magnificent donations to the Sangha during the time of the Buddha. As far as the question of great Buddhist women is concerned, it seems that only in the past decades, the name of Mahapajapati has become a focus of interest and research. In the 7th century's history of Thai Buddhism, the issue of great Buddhist women has been eclipsed by the historical non-existence of the Bhikkhuni order. However, in the past decades, the rise of women's economic, social, educational, and political roles in societies around the world has led to more focused debates related to the spiritual quest for women who wish to be fully ordained in the Buddhist Theravada tradition. This problem is more pronounced in Buddhist Theravada countries. Thailand would be a good example. In Northeast Asian societies like Korea or Japan, this issue is not so controversial as there has been a long history of socially engaged bhikkhuni. Given the changing roles of women today, it is appropriate time to reread and discuss the roles of great women in Buddhist history. It is not only for a more balanced knowledge of Buddhist philosophy and history, but it can also be a great source of inspiration and self-understanding for many Buddhist women today who have to navigate their spiritual life in changing times. This paper offers an analysis of the arguments and actions by two greatest role models for women in the Buddhist history. First, Madsi, the consort of Bodhisattva Vesantara in the Vesantara Jataka tale, who insists on defending her traditional roles as wife when faced with the decision whether to follow her husband into the forest as he was facing banishment from the kingdom. I will argue that Madsi's arguments in her decision to follow Vesantara into the forest indicate a position of total devotion, of supporting roles as wife in the family. The second woman covered in the paper will be Mahapajapati. I will argue that I will outline my reading of the episodes leading to the Buddha's permission for full ordination of women and argue that Pajapati's arguments and actions represent an initiative to negotiate new boundaries for direct spiritual practice for women in Buddhism. It seems that only in the past decades, Thai Buddhist women are beginning to know more about Pajapati's repeated request for ordination to the Buddha. The long shadow of Madsi is still carrying enormous cultural leverage, as she represents perhaps the majority of women who are wife or wishing to be one, rather than women who aspire to be fully ordained themselves. The followings are Madsi's reasoning to Vesantara and her royal parents-in-law why she argues for permission to follow Vesantara into the forest after the banishment sentence by his father, King of CP. Next. She asked, is there a tradition of letting a royal husband living in isolation in the forest? Is it possible for a prince to depart for the forest all by himself? Whichever deep jungle your highness venture into, I, your faithful servant, will follow you. I will not stay behind. I will spend my life and my body serving your highness in gratitude until the end of my day. Even when the food is scarce, having to live only on fruits, I am willing to endure the hardship in your service. I think nothing of using up my life for you, serving you as golden shoes under your royal feet. Next. If you were not to allow me to follow you, I, Madsi, will set up fire and jump into it. Death looks better. Death would be better than facing the gossips of the people, who would judge me a wife only in time of comfort. When it is time of trouble, the wife only enjoys her life of leisure in the palace. If there were to be a danger of death, I, in front of your highness, will rush towards death as a token of gratitude for you. Next. We can skip this one. Next. Okay. Having a husband is like having a crystal tier umbrella above one's head, constantly enhancing one's honor. Being a widow, still young, can never rest in peace. It is like a deserted gem, soiled with dots of stain. Even at low price, it would not attract a buyer. Even if there were a buyer, he would be embarrassed to put the gem on. Where else could I ever find a husband like your highness? Even 100 deaths would not find me another sage like Vesantara. It is interesting to note that the first concern expressed by Madsi in these passages is the question, is there a tradition of letting a royal husband living in isolation in the forest? In asking first and foremost about a tradition, Madsi is looking for a precedent from the past. This question itself implies that there were no such tradition in place. She seems to be implying here that she would be a follower of a tradition if such tradition did exist. As there were no such pre-existing tradition, she has to decide for herself in this situation. Second, her decision is then based on her relationship as wife, who is a faithful servant to her royal husband. The definition of husband and wife as that of a master and servant leads Madsi to say that I will not stay behind. I will spend my life and my body serving your highness in gratitude until the end of my day. Third, the serving of the husband in this particular situation includes gathering food and fruits in the forest, enduring hardships, facing dangers, and even death, possible death. Madsi is imagining what probably will happen to her life in the forest with Vesantara. In some way, one could argue that life in the jungle would create a role reversal between her and Vesantara. Under more normal circumstances, the roles of gathering food and fruits or of facing dangers and hardships in the wilderness could be seen as those of the male head of the family. And yet, as Vesantara is planning to live the life of a semi-hermit in the forest, she needs to resume the role of providing protection and finding food for the family. Some might argue here that this kind of serving her husband in the forest does not indicate a tradition. And yet, one could also argue that the actual activities as reflected in her roles in the forest might be unusual, but they are unusual only because of the unusual circumstances. I would argue that Madsi is performing unusual tasks in the forest to protect and maintain a traditional role of wife as a servant to the husband and the family. She is not posing any challenge to that tradition. She is confirming that tradition in an unusual situation. Fourth, Madsi expresses her sense of serving as simply a repayment or a form of showing gratitude to her royal husband. This expression precludes any possibility of her husband being indebted to her service in the forest. Fifth, Madsi is rejecting any possibility of denial from her husband. She says, if you were not to allow me to follow you, I, Madsi, will set up a fire and jump into it. Death looks better. She sees death as a better prospect than facing the gossips of the peoples who would judge me a wife only in time of comfort. She explicitly says that she fears being a widow more than death itself. We can see here a model of a very strong woman who insists on protecting the traditional role of a wife. In times of trouble, Madsi insists on taking over the more worldly role of the husband, whose life of banishment from the city implies another life of semi-hermit in the forest. I see Madsi as a supportive role model for women whose relationship with the husband reigns supreme, even over death itself. This master-servant relationship with the husband is dramatized through the royal status under distressing situation. The glory and intensity of these wifely roles are highlighted through the life, the decision, and the action of Madsi as the royal consort of a Bodhisattva prince. Now we turn to Mahapajapati. In contrast to Madsi, Mahapajapati, the aunt and foster mother of the Buddha, made a bold request to be fully ordained. Within the context of ancient Hindu society, the request itself perhaps indicates a daring and imaginative mind. Upon facing her repeated request for ordination, the Buddha was recorded as saying to her, Gautami, do not long for the initiation of women into the order or for their ordination as nuns. Let us follow a rather lengthy narration of the events leading to the decision of the Buddha to allow full ordination for women. Next. Mahapajapati made requests for ordination for herself and for 500 other Sakhayan women to the Buddha. And the Buddha replied, do not long for the initiation of women into the order or for their ordination as nuns. Now, Pajapati Gautami, thinking that the Buddha would not give women a chance to become initiated and ordained, paid obeisance to the Blessed One and took her leave. Then, together with her companions, she approached the Sakhayan women and said, Blessed One will not allow honorable women to be initiated and ordained as nuns. Next. However, let us honorable women cut our own hair, acquire our own monastic robes, and attach ourselves to the Blessed One party and follow him, wandering where he wanders throughout the land of Kosala. And if the Blessed One allows it, we will be initiated. And if he does not allow it, we will lead a chaste life in the presence of the Holy Buddha. Now, the Blessed One, after dwelling in the city of Kapilavatthu, set forth to travel through the land of Kosala. Wandering through Kosala in the company of a large group of monks, the Blessed One arrived at the city of Sravati. There he dwelt in Jetavana, Anathapindika's park. Again, Mahapajapati Gautami, thinking that the Buddha would not give women a chance to become initiated and ordained, paid obeisance to the Blessed One and withdrew to the gateway of the Jetavana. There she stood crying and scuffing her toes on the ground. Ananda approached Mahapajapati and said to her, why are you crying, Gautami? She said, indeed, I am crying.